Nash, we've all experienced some extraordinary, very cold weather over the past few days. Lots of people stuck in houses, children off school. We were stockpiling food and toilet paper, Maura.
Are we getting to that stage? Now, we kind of were wondering here as well, of course, talk about the weather going back in the day. How did people actually sort it out and figure it out in the olden times? Well, there's only one person we could call upon us.
Ghostbusters.
Yes, Ghostbusters. And our Ghostbuster is our resident folklorist, Shane Lahan. Ghostbuster, you're welcome.
Well,
Weatherbuster today.
it's great to be here. What a cold snap,
I know.
And what did people do long ago, everyone used to huddle in. They'd huddle in by the fire, Turf was never very good at giving off a lot of heat,
Yeah.
Everyone was in around the old hearth. They used to take that little position, this lovely Irish expression, ag póga na cupán, kissing your knees,
Never heard that expression.
Curling in like that,
Yeah.
That was the way people, I suppose, the natural sense of preserving your heat. But the best thing to do when it was really cold in the past is people went into the bed.
Yeah.
The bed was the only
They took
refuge.
to the
really.
bed.
They took to the bed, the straw bed that was there, maybe the feathered thick mattress that was there, and as many things as preferably you weren't in the bed on your own, because the more people inside the bed, the warmer you were going to be, But
They didn't even have hot water bottles or any of those things.
Sheets, the old flower bags
Yeah.
and go. You had the wool blankets, you had the eider-down quilts. People threw the coats over. I had an aunt, my Auntie Kitty. She always had the fur coat on top of the bed,
Well, that
just
would work.
just to keep her warm, So everyone got into that little nest, and when I think about it, it's hibernation, isn't it? It's the same as the badgers that we have, as the hedgehogs we have, and who also hibernate are my bees. And I love the bees at this time of the year, because when the beehives are covered in snow,
They look so familiar.
they're my beehives. Okay, but what happens is the bees get into a cluster, they vibrate, and when they do, such as the heat, look there, you see it, the snow melts up over
Because of the heat.
The heat in
From
the
the
clusters
bees.
they have. Exactly.
Where do they sleep? It's like Shane is in the house. But do they have, do they use the kind of propolis of the hive, or what do they use to
They just squish
squish
it.
in?
That natural round of
Yes.
the bee brood. That's the shape and that's the form that's there. But people in the past then used to have different ways of saying whether it was going to be cold in the past. There was kind of long-term forecasts and short-term forecasts. The long-term forecasts very often related to mushrooms. Believe it or not, there was an old one: mushrooms galore, much snow in store. No mushrooms at all, no snow will fall. So one of the ideas was, and this year we had loads of mushrooms, so I'm not a bit surprised at all that we have snow this year. At least anyway, the old maxim carried through this time round. But they used to also rely on other things. For example, you'd have the onions long ago, when after you dug them out, you'd let the skin form in them. If there was a thick skin, fellas long ago would say, oh, it's going to be a very cold winter altogether.
Because the onions kind of, the nature.
Knew they were protecting themselves, or if the old nuts, if the shell on the nut, the acorn or the hazelnuts were hard. So people had it. But the short-term thing then is that if they thought, looked up, they often made their predictions, believe it or not, at night. The moon was a great predictor, and they looked up at Sul Captain Ray, the hen's eye of the moon, as it were, the ring around the moon, and that was going to tell you whether whether it was going to be frosty or whatever. When the ring was, what was it again? The near ring far cold, far ring near cold. So you had the same sort of prediction that was there that went on.
Yeah, I even remember, Dad. Anyone in the farming kind of years ago, they'd always look. Anyone on the land would really naturally look to nature to see those type of things.
They'd have names for Garine the Galley, the garden of the moon, as it were. They'd have names for the covering that was over the moon. The robins, of course, then the birds. Everyone looked at the birds.
Would the robin come telling you a story, kind of what was happening, or
the robins would come closer to the house the colder it got. I have a bird feeder outside the back door, and honest to God, it's like full of birds at the moment, because
they're
of the cold. They're everywhere. So people looked at the birds. They looked at the crane. We don't have cranes in Ireland, we have herons, but we all call them the crane. If the crane was going west, going away from the bad east wind, as it were, you knew that the weather was going to go bad.
But it was the same thing with seagulls. Oftentimes now you'd see a seagull maybe about 10 miles inland. You go, what's the seagull doing in there? Well, because the weather's very bad out there, he's coming in
like a storm.
That's it.
But bring it on a little bit. When history comes in with the annals in the 5th century onwards, we get incredible accounts. And I picked out a few for you. In the year 748, there was snow of unusual depth that nearly all the cattle of the whole of Ireland perished. Okay, so we have this account. Okay, in 856, there was so much ice and frost, so the principal rivers and lakes of Ireland could be crossed by people on foot and on horseback from the 23rd of November until the 7th of January. And fellas took advantage of this. Do you know, there was one crowd, they were building a church and they had to go across Lough Erne, and they were delighted because instead of going all the way around when it froze over, they could take all the stones. It was a shortcut to go across and do that. You know?
Unbelievable.
There was a great account. I love this one. In the year, here it is, 1134, a shower of hailstones around Cashel. So every hailstone was as big as an apple that went into a big man's mouth, okay? It had 3 points, and when the icy hailstones melted, the horses were swimming around the marketplace in Cashel.
And where would the annals, where would most of these come from? Was it the monasteries or?
So every year, you know, there would be a little account, you know, and they were full of all sorts of details, like who was the king, who they were at war with. There would be accounts of comets and eclipses, cattle plagues, lightning strikes, Viking
And who was writing them mostly?
So the monastic community were writing them,
mostly,
and
yeah.
they were bringing together history, and history, if you like, is actually Christian history, which is world history, and amalgamating
It was almost like they were writing a diary too.
Yeah.
Life.
It's fantastic.
Gee, that's unreal. And there was, tell us about this just before you go. This ice, what the ice
It's the
house?
first fridge in Ireland, is it?
Well, it is. We, you know, we think ice. We think this bad weather is sort of something negative. But what happened is that lots of the big houses used to have lakes. They used to keep those lakes specially because when it was cold, as it is now, they would take their ice. They would construct these amazing constructions, these deep pits in the ground with a drain at the bottom. They would compact the ice in, and by doing that, what would happen is that above that they could hang their baskets with their fish and with their meat and so on. It was an early form of fridge.
Yeah.
It was
Before we let you go, we have to
two
show a
more.
photo.
Two
Can
more
we show a
pictures.
photo, Shane?
This is young Shane Lahan here. Look at that. And the gang. Where are you there now, Shane?
I'm in the front, the youngest, 1976. Look at our hats on us and our scarf.
The vocal bond.
Yeah, and there I am, but you know, throwing snow. I remember that was my big snow. If you like, we had different periods of big snows, but that was my.
We never had any. We'd only snowed once when we were in primary school, and my mother let us off school. That's how little it snowed where we were. And I remember we were brushing the road, right, brushing the snow up the road. And it was all pebbles trying to make a snowman. It was
we're
more
kind of like
the
that
pebble
in the
man.
islands too. With the West Coast, we're kind of similar kind of climate. Well, that's
Shane Gurmahaga.
Shane Gurmahaga, thank
Always
you so
great
much
to
for
have
coming
you.
in. It's fabulous. That is it for today. Thanks